Hello, and welcome to episode number 186 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have two of those, in Dustin Gouker and Adam Candee. You can follow them on the Twitter machine. Absolutely free. Just smash the button at Dustin Gouker, at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. And if you hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. Not an incredibly busy week, so just going to hit on a couple of topics here and not leave you guys hanging. You know you want your LSR podcast each and every week, so we are going to make sure and deliver that. We'll also do a little clarification on some of these lazy headlines that are going on out there in the Major League Baseball regional network stuff. We'll talk about some Barstool news. Dustin, of course, like to pontificate a little bit on that. But Adam, why don't you kick us off with how things are going over in Massachusetts?
Well, most importantly, Matt, as you said, we don't want to leave people without an episode of the LSR podcast, because I know that there are many of you who rely on us to help your houseplants grow. You leave it playing when you leave the house. Maybe, you know, your baby can't get to sleep and you need my melodic tones to just drone on for a while. And I'm really good at that.
The voice is, I mean, look, the voice is legit. Everyone knows this.
Okay, but I mean, every now and then I like to remind myself. No, I'm kidding. Like, I get tired of the sound of my own voice after a while. But Massachusetts, hey, you're brand new to legal sports betting, so maybe you're not tired of me yet. 6 sports books online launch over the weekend. A few interesting things to note. We obviously won't have numbers for a while in terms of what the online launch looked like. We did get some initial numbers from Massachusetts in terms of their first month of in-person sports betting. It was paltry, as you would expect. Didn't clear 20 million in terms of handle in February with 3 retail sports books live. That's to be expected. We know now that most markets that put some form of online out there are going to do at least 80%-ish of their wagers, if not more, by online channels. And so we did see 6 of them launch over the weekend. No real major stories to come out of that. And frankly, that's a good thing, considering we've had previous launches where a sportsbook's product wasn't working very well, or, you know, people were feeling overwhelmed and inundated with their advertising and so on and so on. I would note that the Barstool situation I thought was interesting, because we had a number of their personalities not only talking about betting on their platform, but saying, did Dave Portnoy around 10 a.m. on Friday when it launched, like, hey, I can't bet on Barstool yet. What's going on? Let's get this together. Like, basically, like, hey, my own product isn't working right now. And so we knew that the regulations in Massachusetts said that employees of their own book cannot bet at their own book, and Penn had recently completed its acquisition of Barstool. So we put the question to both Penn National, or Penn Entertainment, excuse me, and to Barstool. And apparently what happened is they have put a certain amount of employees onto what they call loan-out agreements. That includes Dave Portnoy. That includes Dan Katz, Big Cat, Deion Sanders, Patrick Beverly. Like, a number of very specific people are not technically employees of Barstool. So I thought that was an interesting little twist to what we found out about Barstool on the opening weekend of Massachusetts online betting.
Guys, I need a shell corporation so I can bet. Somebody do that for me.
Well, Bet Gouker is just getting launched in Oregon, right? Like, I didn't know that you were licensed yet.
Yeah, I mean,
it's Gouker though without the E, right? Because that's how you have to do it, right? Well, it's Goukr. Like, there's no E.
Well, it's in Massachusetts, it's Bet Gouker.
Yeah. Yes, Bet Gouker even works even better, Dustin. With all, yeah, I mean, I'm glad there was some clarification on that, Adam. I mean, certainly this is one of the deals where it's been that way, certainly in Nevada forever, right? I mean, like, you can't bet at your own sportsbook in Nevada. I imagine that was going to be one of the deals that just carried over for forever with all of these other states that go along. And people might say, like, well, what does it matter if you can bet at your own sportsbook? If you can't bet at your own sportsbook, you can bet at other sportsbooks and stuff. And it's like, well, Adam, the thing is that we know that you can identify what sharper bettors, right? I mean, you can identify certain things and stuff like that. And so if you see a bet coming in and you know a line is going to move or a market is going to move, or you have an idea that things are going to go a different way, it's a very slippery slope if you're betting at your own book when it comes to all of that stuff. And so I think that is I'm glad that is a thing that we don't have to worry about.
Well, and I would add to that, Matt, that often we have these, and we're going to get into talking a little bit about one of them, these parlays or these offers that are based on something that one of these personalities has recommended, at least from a marketing perspective. And so, it probably at least alleviates, if not eliminates, questions about the legitimacy of some of those as well.
Yeah, Dustin, that is a perfect segue there to heading into that discussion.
Yeah, one more thing on Massachusetts. I think is interesting out of that geo-comply data, because we're going to be waiting for numbers for a while, real numbers. But it is interesting to me after this in Ohio, Massachusetts was punching above its weight against other states that had similar sizes and population. Obviously fairly good time in front of March Madness for Massachusetts to launch. But we've now seen 2 states in a row where we've had this even more of a critical mass. We've said how big launches are. These launches are getting even bigger. Part of that you presume is just the national consciousness is changing, that people are more aware and more attuned to this. That's reading a lot into a very little bit of data, but I think we have 2 pretty good data points where we just saw really high intake of new players into the legalized system, and that's good. So on to what the thing that I've been ranting about for going on a week now is so Barstool Sportsbook has had this promotion with Big Cat called Can't Lose Parlays. And there's a lot of people who like to disagree with me on this one. I think there's a lot of people who agree with me too, but we just don't need can't lose parlays. I don't care if, yes, all the 3 of us know it's a joke. Haha, funny. Obviously the parlay can lose, but this is not just, we're not playing fun and games here. This is a real thing where, somebody looks at this. Yes, maybe they can identify that, yes, it actually can lose, but they also think that, oh, hey, this guy who I know from Barstool or who's on this app says this is a good bet. Maybe I should bet this. I think that's the problem from a responsible gambling / joke standpoint. Massachusetts, has very high level of regulation. Is actually addressing it this morning or this afternoon in Massachusetts time about whether this is okay under Massachusetts regulations. Sounds like Barstool and Penn are at least in Massachusetts taking this language out. I'm here to tell you, let's stop this everywhere. We don't need can't lose parlay. If your business marketing plan is so tied to you have to use this exact phrase, can't lose parlay. Maybe your business plan sucks and stop it. We are in this, again, we say this every week now. We're in this period of re-regulation and people really taking a look at this and just the idea that the optics of can't lose parlay is, oh, that's okay, it's just funny, haha. That time is over. We need to be, if it's not coming, the regulation is not coming from the regulators themselves, it needs to be self-regulation of the sports books and say, we've seen so much of this after Ohio that people are pulling back and identifying what's really important, what's not. Can't lose parlay is not one of those things that's important.
Yeah. I mean, Adam, it's one of those things where we often talk about okay, we understand and we get it that we're in the bubble, right? And we understand that we are super immersed in all of this. Well, this is one of those times where I think the people who would give the opposition to this need to understand that maybe you're too far in the bubble and too far in the weeds, whereas you are savvy enough or have been around it enough to understand that no bet is can't lose, right? I mean, like you get it, haha, whatever, all that. Yes. But we are talking about, for example, if we look at what Eilers put out, they estimate, over 400,000 new accounts were signed up in Massachusetts, whatever. Of those 400,000 new accounts, you have to assume 85 to 90% of those people are probably new-ish bettors, right? Are kind of experimenting with all of this for the first time. And so when you say certain things to someone who doesn't get the industry as well as we do, or someone that has been doing this as long as, these even look, you can be an upper level recreational bettor and you can probably even understand that, nothing is a can't lose. It's a marketing gimmick. That being said, that is something that people outside of the bubble, people not familiar, people who haven't been around all of this might not actually get. And that's one of those things where you do have to take a step back and you have to say, hey, for the greater good here, is this really incredibly necessary?
I agree with you, Matt. And I think there are people out there who would argue with both of us and say, oh, give people more credit than that, right? They'll understand, right? They'll get it. It's clear from the way that they talk about it, the tone of voice and this and that. And that's where I would take issue, is to say the people who are ultimately going to make decisions about whether this is okay or not, doesn't even matter if they're in the bubble, they're not in on the joke and they're not in on the context. And when we look at the fact that bills to regulate sports betting advertising are in state legislatures and in Congress, those don't come with context, right? And we're already spending years on this podcast talking about the education curve for legislators and regulators with understanding the simple mechanics of sports betting, the very, very basics of it in the first place. If you think that the average legislator or regulator understands the nuance of what a personality from Barstool is talking about, or a personality from FanDuel or DraftKings or anywhere else for that matter, they don't. And they're not interested in it. And they're not going to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's the kind of thing that, again, Dustin and I have referenced working in politics in the past. It's the kind of thing that ends up on a big poster board behind a senator talking about why all of these things need to be banned.
And Dustin, it's a little bit of a double standard as well with all of this, because it's like the same people that want to say, hey, like, give them a break, it's a joke, it's a whatever, are also the same people who flame touts who say lock of the year or lock of the week or whatever and stuff like that. Like, it's the same people saying that, where it's kind of like, oh, give the guy a break, it's just whatever, blah, blah. And then like, but then a tout service comes out and says 5-star lock of the week, century, millennium, and whatever. And then like they get flamed for that. It's kind of the same thing, because again, like, we all know there's no such thing as a 5-star lock of the year, century, whatever, blah, blah, and that's the reason that these people get flamed or whatever. And so it's like this little double standard that goes on just because, I guess some people have a likability to the personality themselves.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's not hard to make this into something that actually looks like a joke. Like, all you have is can't lose parlay. Like that's 3 words on a screen inside the sports book. Like, you're not like to assume everybody who's looking at Barstool Sportsbook is in on this joke that Big Cat is a bad gambler. Like, sure, I guess. Like,
right.
That's either maybe that's saying something about your sportsbook that you're not able to acquire other customers, or it says a lot. But not everybody who's looking at this little widget on a sportsbook app is in on this joke. I can guarantee you that. But yeah, it's so hard to. You could do this you could put 5-star diamond lock of the century millennium, and that would be funny. And I think people then that's actually reads as a joke, maybe, because but you just can't lose. And like that at least assumes that, yes, this person on the other side of this app says, oh, this is a good bet, you should bet it. That's again where I come from. Yes, we could all, and yeah, I'm not sure many of us can understand it's not can't lose, but again, it's not worth the squeeze. That's what it comes down to. Like, just keep it off my legislative and regulatory hearings, so I don't have to see this like come back to bite us all in the ass in however many years. Which again, the other thing that we're gonna talk about is Pennsylvania. Again, this is the pullback we talk about every day. We're seeing pullback. Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board told operators free bet no longer around the state. Now to the sportsbook's credits, this has largely already been done. Ohio is the start. Everybody's kind of pulled back and find other ways to market their product. So, this is the environment you're throwing us out there. If you're gonna die on the hill of, yeah, we really need we have to have can't lose parlays, or we have to have this very specific language and not come up with anything else to market our sports book. I think that's a problem with your marketing department and not a problem with the regulatory environment we all find ourselves in.
Yeah, Adam, I'm glad Dustin mentioned that, because I actually have been paying a lot of attention to this. And since the Ohio stuff came out, I've been in a couple of different states since then that have legalized sports betting across the country outside of Nevada. I pay hyper attention to this just because of this industry that we're in and the stuff that we do here. And with all that, I have seen that for the majority, specifically the big boys or whatever, that language is now gone. They have completely changed all of their marketing with all of that. But I think this just really does kind of pile on to what we've been talking about throughout the theme in the course of this whole podcast. So it's like, listen, what may seem obvious to you, if you are somewhat savvy in the industry, is not necessarily obvious to the masses. And that's kind of where we need to be with all of this. And I think, as we move forward, the sports books themselves need to sit down and understand that, hey, we might be a little bit too in the bubble and in the weeds here, and say, step back. Is this something that 98% of people are going to easily be able to decipher? And, that's kind of how we can move forward with all of this. Because again, on its surface, labeling something free bet is not incredibly harmful and all that, but it is at least a little bit confusing, because we all know it's not a free bet. You still have to put money up first, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm glad that we're moving in the direction of just complete and utter transparency in all of this and leave any ambiguity out of it.
From the high level view on this, it comes across to me as an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure. And when state level regulators step in, and it might not seem like a huge change for them to say, hey, in Ohio, you are not allowed to use this terminology. But what it is that is proof of what the gaming industry has said about itself for a long time about it is heavily regulated. Mm-hmm. And it is hopefully responsive to those regulators when things like this free bet ban come down in Ohio. It then gets mirrored in Pennsylvania. It gets mirrored in Massachusetts and in other places. And that, when it's done effectively, shows that sweeping regulation at the federal level is not something that this industry needs. But they need to prove it. You need to be able to prove it on a regular basis when you can do it at the state level, when you can do it with state level regulators stepping in, and they make what is not a heavy-handed change. It's a small change, and operators respond to it, and they realize, hey, okay, now that we've gotten our hands slapped, and now that we've gotten a few $100,000 in fines over this sort of thing, maybe it's not just the cost of doing business. Maybe we need to be serious about stepping back from this and responding to public perception. And that is another big thing is, like you said, Matt, realizing that everybody has an in the bubble perspective to some level, and that responding to outside perception when it comes to this industry in particular is important.
And we can all be very dismissive of this idea of a federal ban like that. And I'm going to dismiss it for the next couple of years. It's not happening this year. It's not happening in a presidential election year. That's not going to happen. But just dismiss it all over the long term for your own peril, right? This is a thing that could happen. We just saw Belgium ban gambling advertisements. This is a world where this is possible. And if you don't take some responsibility and be a little bit of a little bit of proactive, we're not asking you to stop advertising or pull everything back. Just do the stuff on the margins, just cut it out. The stuff that's really bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like we said, it seems like it's heading in that direction. Of course, we're going to, we're monitoring this stuff every single week. And so, looks like everybody's at least trending in the right direction. Hopefully that continues and we don't have to deal with any more of the nonsense here. Before we get out of here, though, this is something I talked to Adam about on the side, just because I did want to clarify this. And I think most people listening to this podcast probably already know this, but hopefully we are getting new listeners, and hopefully there are new people who are attracted to the news and the ongoings in the industry. And basically a whole bunch of lazy headlines came out, Adam, which was Bally Sports bankruptcy and whatever. And all that. And I have people texting me going, are you serious? This company is that bad off? And all of a sudden everything is I'm like, no, they had the naming rights to the network. It's actually Sinclair. And by the way, it's a subsidiary of Sinclair. You had to do all this stuff, but it's way easier because it was just branded Bally Sports. It's Bally Sports bankruptcy going across these headlines. And it's no, Bally Sports still has Bally's and as a company and all that. They still have their casinos and they're still going to try to do the sports betting thing and all their thing like that. They're not, it's not them that's doing the bankruptcy in this.
Man, I gotta say, if you're Fox Sports and you used to be branded all over these RSNs, you dodged one on this, didn't you?
You did.
You don't have to be out there caught up in the middle of bankruptcy stories. Yeah, Diamond Sports, the subsidiary of Sinclair, filed for bankruptcy. It's something they had signaled for a few weeks now was a possibility, and that's going to put, I believe, it's something in the range of 40 regional sports networks into bankruptcy. And look, Major League Baseball was already planning for this. There are plans to continue broadcasting games on those networks this year. And the big thing to understand for our industry here is that Bally Bet, a subsidiary of Bally Corp, is not affected by this.
Yeah.
And if you want more information, I might just have a story coming out at Legal Sports Report later today, further explaining to people, since we now have seen the actual diamond filing, that that's not going to be a concern. Now, there are plenty of other concerns for Bally Bet that we've already covered on this podcast, but this bankruptcy in particular is not one of them.
And the only thing I do want, and I'm not trying to, get ahead of anything here, Dustin, but I mean, look, there are some of these teams now that are, and certainly in even just teams in the same region, who are kind of coming out saying like, hey, look, we'll just take over the network. These are things that we're going to do. It does make me wonder, with the betting partnerships that we do see with the various teams and things and stuff like that, if I'm using this for an example because the Astros and the Rockets got together and said, hey, we'll just take over the network. Like we'll do it ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. Do we see that network brought to you by whatever, Sports XYZ or whatever, should stuff start to move in Texas and things like that? I mean, I do think that it kind of opens up maybe some stuff that we'll be talking about maybe over the next 6 months to a year, depending on how this network stuff does get divvied up and, what Major League Baseball decides to do with all of these. Are they going to just hand them over to the teams and whatnot, or is Major League Baseball going to try to do it themselves? But we might actually have some gambling implications with all of this, not gambling in itself, but gambling businesses and ties and different things down the line, because, they're going to have to foot the bill for these networks some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you guys are way more the TV experts than I am, but they're like, all I know that the teams and the leagues still want these games on being shown somewhere, and they want the money that comes in from the rights, right? So whether that's done this way, or they're going to, broadcast it themselves, or just find another way to do it, they clearly they're not ready for the disruption of, all this, our rights are now toast, right? Because we're not being able to serve this in a local market. So it will be interesting to see what happens. Yes, or maybe there's more niche streaming. We've seen, if latency ever gets straightened out, we know sportsbooks all want to show these games. Is that something that not in the near future, but maybe more of that in the future as well?
Yeah. Adam, can you imagine if you weren't able to watch the Yankees? Could you just what would your life feel like if you couldn't just turn on a Yankee game and you had to follow it on the little game tracker, on one of the things, how that would, but your life would significantly over the summer be substantially worse, right? I mean, for me, it even would, and I don't even have a baseball team. I don't have a team.
Let me take you back to the mid-'90s when the Yankees played the Mariners in the division series, and it was on something called the Baseball Network. That was a playoff game that was on something called the Baseball Network that I couldn't access. I was in Las Vegas. I couldn't access it. My mom and I were sitting in the car, in the garage, with the engine turned on, listening to the radio broadcast of the game in extra innings. That's the level to which I follow these things.
Yeah.
Every day, 4:00 comes around, I turn on the television and it just goes on in the background. And that is just further proof that even if it's not the Yes Network and the Yankees, there is money to be made somewhere within this. If we go to a streaming app that is more team-based, right now, MLB TV has at least put in a version of its streaming where you can get a single team. But maybe it's something that the team ends up taking over in some way and provides more original content from inside their own locker room and charges you a monthly subscription that goes outside of baseball season. There are ways to do this, but it's going to take some reimagining.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've seen bet broadcasts of the NBA so far. The ESPN has put the Daily Wager crew, side by side with a broadcast to kind of walk us through things. They're going to end up paying the bills somehow. Now, again, I'm not trying to say this is going to happen or whatever, but it would not shock me if these rights do get given to the teams or whatever, if we don't see something along those lines, as you mentioned, Dustin, whether it's a streaming companion that is gambling based or betting based or whatever it might be somewhere along the way. It would not shock me. Wouldn't shock me. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. All I know is if T-Mobile didn't give me free MLB TV every year, I'd be out another $100 some. So thank you, T-Mobile. It's not a
Exactly.
sponsor. We didn't take any money from T-Mobile.
Unsponsored. However, if you would like to sponsor, you can slide into Dustin or Adam's DMs. You can do that, or follow him on Twitter first. Anyway, at Dustin Gouker, at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. Everything we talk about here on the podcast, you can find over at legalsportsreport.com. So please go over there, check out Adam's team and what they've got going on, all of the hard work and listening to hearings and going through filings and all the stuff, so you don't have to. We are definitely appreciative of all of that. For Dustin, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.